Hello and welcome to Living a Culture of Life podcast by Human Life International. I'm your host, Colleen, and I'm joined today by Theresa Bonopartis from Entering Canaan Ministry. Welcome, Theresa.
Hi, Colleen. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you on the show today. And I'm really excited for our conversation because we're going to be talking about how abortion affects women, and you're going to be sharing your story with our listeners. So that might be a good place to start. Would you mind starting this podcast off by sharing your own story so people know what your background is?
Sure, no problem at all. Okay, so I grew up in a Catholic family, went to church every Sunday, everything, but I didn't really know my faith. It was just something that we were expected to do, and we did. And I also grew up, and I'm part of the Woodstock generation, and actually went to Woodstock, and I ended up in a relationship with someone and slept with them, not because I was in love or anything, but just because that was the sign of the times. And I actually remember thinking that there was something wrong with me because I wasn't sexually active. And as it turned out, I became pregnant. And it's so funny, like the things that you remember. Like I could totally remember exactly where I was sitting when I found out that I was pregnant, what chair I was sitting in my parents' house, and making the phone call to the doctor and finding out my test results were positive, and just going through like a whole wide range of feelings, from being kind of excited that I was pregnant and was going to have a baby, but also being like terrified to tell my parents about it. And so I told the father of the baby, who said that he would marry me, never pressured me to have an abortion or anything. And I did not want an abortion. And I honestly didn't ever think it was even an option because we were Catholic and I knew it was against the Catholic faith. So that wasn't really something I worried about. I worried about telling my parents and them being angry with me and all those other things, but I didn't worry about abortion. And so, but I also didn't want to face the consequences, so I hid my pregnancy until I was towards the end of my fourth month. You could wear peasant shirts and stuff at that time, and so I was able to hide it very easily. And I told my parents that I was pregnant, and I got a response very different from the one that any of the scenarios that I had played in my head. My father got up out of his chair, told me to forget that I was his daughter, that he was going to forget that I was his daughter, and to get out of his house. And I just remember like being so shocked because, like I said, of all the scenarios I had played in my head, that wasn't any of them. And I called a friend, and she came to pick me up. And another friend's mom told me that I could stay with them for a little while. And I went to their house. And I just remember just being like, feeling like, well, first of all, totally shocked. I was disowned by my family. Um, and just also feeling very alone, frightened. Started fighting with the baby's father, told him to leave me alone, and he did. I mean, he was a kid too, and I don't blame him at all. It was just like I couldn't even deal with him anymore because I was under such stress. And my father started having my sister call me up every day and tell me that he wanted me to have an abortion. And every day I would tell her that I wasn't going to do it and that I didn't care what he said. And the day would go by and the next day would come, and everybody in the house where I was staying would get up, go to work, go to school. And I was just kind of left there by myself. And I always think of Dave Reardon, who does post-abortion research, the Elliott Institute. He always talks about how many women are socially aborted before they ever step foot into an abortion clinic. And I totally related to that when I read it, because that's exactly the way that I felt, that I was totally cut off from everything and people that I loved and I thought loved me. And I was put in this position until day after day, my sister continued to call me until finally I agreed to have the abortion, not because I felt like I had a choice, but because I felt like I had no choice.
Mhm.
Because I was so far along in my pregnancy, my abortion was in a hospital. And it's so funny because this hospital where it was, they just tore it down recently. And I remember it getting torn down and just thinking how happy I was that it got torn down and wondering how many babies died in that place. But anyway, so I was brought to this hospital. I still to this day I can't remember how I got there. I have no clue. They put me on the maternity ward where other people were having babies, and I remember the doctor coming into the room. Nobody told me the development of my baby. Nobody told me anything about the procedure that was going to happen to me. I really knew nothing. But because I was so far along in my pregnancy, I had a saline abortion. And for those people who don't know what that is, they inject saline solution into your abdomen. And what it really does is it burns the baby to death. And you go into labor and you give birth to a dead baby. So that's pretty much what happened to me. Without me even knowing it. Like nobody told, I was 17. Nobody told me anything. I was laying like in the hospital bed, just not really knowing at all what was going on or what was happening. And I remember my sister calling and saying, "Is it over?" And I can remember saying to her, "I don't know if it's over. I don't even know I don't know what's going on." And going into labor and being in labor for hours. And then that's exactly what happened. I gave birth to a dead baby boy. To this day, I still see him in my mind's eye when I think about it, laying in the bed next to me. I remember looking at his little fingers and his little toes. And I just remember being so struck with, oh my God, how is this allowed? How could anybody be able to do this? And I remember I wanted to jump out the window, but I had I just didn't have the courage to do it. But I was just so shocked that this was legal, that we actually allowed this to go on. And it's so funny now because you hear, like, with the chemical abortions that are happening, so many women that are having chemical abortions are seeing their babies. And I just think of the trauma that they're going to live with all their lives, because I know the trauma that I've lived with all my life because of it. And it's just really terrible that in the name of some kind of good for women, that these things are happening, and so many people are silently suffering. And that's what ended up happening to me. I left the hospital the next day. I remember the cleaning lady coming into the room after the next day and asking me if I had a boy or a girl, because I was on the maternity ward. And I remember just looking at her and thinking, I couldn't even believe what was happening. It was just all surreal and unbelievable to me. And I went back to my friend's house, and I remember a lot of my friends were there, and they were all partying. And I just remember getting drunk and getting sick, 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 because I wanted to do anything to get away with just happened. And after that, like, to say your life changed or my life changed is really an understatement. It really is. I just, like, it was just such a life altering event. And I couldn't find anything or anybody that talked about grieving or the trauma or anything. Like, you felt like, oh, so alone, because they made it sound like, and they still do, right, that abortion is such a wonderful thing for women. And I felt like there was something wrong with me because it was bothering me. And this still happens nowadays. I get calls in the ministry from women all the time that have held this for decades inside of themselves, and feeling alone and with nobody to talk to, and thinking there's something wrong with them because they've had an abortion, and it's not okay with them. So I mean, even recently, you read these things that have been happening lately in the news, where they're saying how, like, women could be traumatized because they can't have an abortion. So they acknowledge that trauma, but they still refuse to acknowledge what we go through as people that have had abortions, and they refuse to acknowledge it. And so I lived a good 15 years of my life, or close to it, hating myself, um, just feeling like there was no place for me, getting high, being promiscuous, all the things that you hear many women talk about, anything to escape what they've done. You just start leading. It's almost like I'm doomed anyway. So what the heck is the difference? It doesn't matter what I do because of this situation. And I ended up finding who was to become my future husband. He was an alcoholic and a drug abuser. And you know what they say, you pick what you think you deserve. And I certainly didn't think I deserved anything better than that, because I hated myself. I ended up getting married, and having like two additional children, but my life was far from okay, because I was living in abuse and alcoholism. And I often say that if I didn't have my children, I might have stayed in that relationship forever, but because I didn't want them to live with that, I ended up leaving my husband when my kids were very young. And yeah, it's just it's so crazy when I think about it. I ended up going back to school. I became a drug and alcohol abuse counselor. And what ended up happening to me was that I was seeing so many clients that had had abortions and were looking for help, and I wasn't able to help them because I hadn't even been able to find help for myself, even though I tried. I went to counseling. We went to marriage counseling. I would always say my abortion bothered me, and everybody would always say, "Forget about it. It's in your past. That's not what's bothering you. It's because your husband's an alcoholic. It's because of this, that, and the other thing." It was never because of the fact that I participated in the death of my own child. Never. Nobody would acknowledge that. And so you become confused. I suffered from depression, anxiety, just the whole gamut of different emotions that happened. And what ended up happening to me is, like I said, I went back to school. I became a counselor, was raising my two sons by myself, and had started getting all these clients that were post-abortive. And it got to the point where I just couldn't take it anymore. And I ended up burning out of my job. And that really was the beginning of my healing journey, because here I had tried to build this house, myself, of self-reliance, and God just took it all away so that I'd learned to depend on him. And what ended up happening was my son was 7. And even though I hadn't stepped foot into a church for years because thought I was condemned to hell, I didn't send my son to religious instructions because I wanted him to make the sacraments. I used to leave him off at the corner, tell him I would pick him up at the corner. And one night, one day he came home with a piece of paper when he was going to make his first communion about a meeting for the parents on first penance. And I went to the church. I was terrified, but I went because I really wanted my son to have the sacraments. And the priest came into the gym. We were in a gym and chairs in a circle on the gym floor. And he started talking about God's mercy and God's forgiveness. And he started like listing different sins. God will forgive adultery. God will forgive addiction. God will forgive this, that. And all of a sudden he said, and God will forgive the sin of abortion. And I just remember sitting there and like, I thought that I didn't hear him right. Like, how could this be possible that there could be forgiveness for abortion? And I went home that night with the first little bit of hope I had had in like 15 years. Like, maybe there is hope for me. Maybe there is a way to get out of this. And I waited a couple of days and I called the rectory and I asked if I could speak to this priest. I could still remember pulling up to the door and being terrified to go in, totally terrified to go in and talk to him. But I was so desperate. I was just suffering so much. I was so upset that my kids were dealing with me with this all the time, like all of it, like I just felt so badly that they had a depressed mother, anxiety. I would shut myself in my room. I was really struggling. And so I forced myself to go see this priest. And I went in there and I told him about what had happened with me. And for the first time in 15 years, I felt like somebody heard me. Because that's another thing. Like, even the other people in your life, once you have the abortion, they don't want to talk about it anymore. They want you to get over it. It's done. It's over. Forget about it. Move on with your life. And people are not able to do that. Healing from abortion is multifaceted. It hits you on a spiritual, emotional, psychological level. And there's definitely processes that you need to go through to be able to heal from those things. And so that day that I went to this priest, I felt heard for the first time. And I actually went to the sacrament of reconciliation myself. He gave me a miraculous medal to put around my neck, and actually sang a song. I took out a guitar and actually sang a song about God's mercy. And I remember leaving there thinking, at last I felt some kind of hope. And from then on, it was really just a journey for me of spiritually connecting with God, learning about God's love and his mercy for me, learning the different dynamics of healing from abortion and applying them to my life. It was multifaceted, and it's a journey. And I always say that don't think anybody could look at an abortion experience without first knowing the love of God, because it's such a horrific, terrible thing that unless we know that we're loved unconditionally, it's almost impossible to look. And that's why I think we see a lot of these radical pro-lifers. I mean, we have a wounded society. There's been 63 million abortions in our country, and there are millions and millions and millions of people that are wounded, that are walking around, that are radical pro abortion feminists, because this is how they continue to justify and rationalize what they did. If they don't do that, then they have to look. And if they don't have a relationship with God, it's almost impossible to look at that. And so I just began my journey, and it took a long time. But I finally reached healing. I mean, one day I was sitting, I was just suffering so much. By then, I had finally found a counselor that did post abortion counseling. And she just kept saying to me, "You're near the end. Just keep praying. It's going to be okay." And one night I was just like in excruciating pain. It's like, it's really hard to explain to people the hell of living with an abortion. And I went into my bathroom because I didn't want my kids to hear me. And I just squatted on the floor. And for hours, no exaggeration, I just sat on the floor saying, "Jesus, I trust in you. Jesus, I trust in you." And somewhere in the middle of the night, I just felt this warm rush go through me. And I knew that he healed me in that moment. And that's not to say that that nothing ever comes up again. Like sometimes people talk and they say, "Oh, you get healed from an abortion," and they make it seem like that's the end of it. I hate to say this to anybody, but it's not the end of it. It's never going to be the end of it until we get to heaven. That's when the end of it is going to be. Is it different? Totally different. He's definitely healed me when I do have struggles with it, and or something comes up. I can identify what's going on, and I can move past it. And of course, more than anything, I'm walking with God now, and Mary's huge in my life. And so these are the things that give me the courage to keep going on, that help me through any battles I might have with it. But I don't know if did you get to see the Entering Canaan painting?
No,
It,
I
it
missed that.
So if people go on the website, it's www.enteringcanaan.com. I had a painting painted that really came to me in prayer. And it's a picture of, Our Lady of Czestochowa
Mhm.
is the patroness of the Entering Canaan Ministry. And that came to me in prayer too. She has scars on her face. And the painting is said to be painted by St. Luke. And they tried to cover up the scars multiple times, but the scars kept coming back out again. Very much like post-abortive people, right? Forget about it;
Mhm.
it's in your past, but the scars keep coming back out again. And so she's been the patroness of the ministry, since its beginnings. So this painting is a picture of her sitting at the foot of the cross, and she's holding an aborted baby, and Mary Magdalene is standing next to her, looking down on them both, obviously representing people that have had abortions. And on the side of the painting, you could see Mary leading Mary Magdalene to the promised land. And I really truly think that that's what healing is, relinquishing our children to Mary at the foot of the cross, to Jesus,
Mhm.
and allowing her to work in our lives to heal us and to lead us to her son. And on the way to the promised land, there's going to be battles. There's no question about it. There's like abortion connectors. We call them people, places, or things that bring up the trauma of your abortion in the present. And you need to identify those things. But she's with you in this journey when these things are going on, leading you always to the love of her son and to salvation and to eternal life, where you'll be with your child for eternity. and
That's
and that's pretty much the way. Yeah, it's definitely her ministry. There's no question about it. She reveals things all the time, constantly. She's always revealing something, which is really beautiful. Like
yeah.
just are accompanying us in our healing journey.
That's beautiful. I'll definitely look up the painting on your website. I was on your website looking at the different things you do, but somehow I missed that. Or if I did see it, it didn't register what it was. So
Right,
that's
right.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's powerful, and it's so funny because like she gives me these things in prayer all the time. It always comes in prayer, but then and I don't have a clue what she's doing, and then I'll be like later, like oh my gosh, like as it reveals itself to me too, and
Yeah.
it's constantly revealing. It's constantly revealing the journey, constantly revealing their love, their forgiveness, their accompaniment. They're yearning for us to have healing. Our children's yearning for us to get to heaven.
Mhm.
Like most people will feel like, oh, my baby's going to condemn me. You know, it's going to say, look, God, she's the one that killed me. Damn her to hell. But that's not the truth. They're living in the Lord, right? That's what it says in the Gospel of Life. And they desire their parents' healing. They desire reconciliation with their parents. And I truly believe that's what God desires too, to put things right, to give us back on a spiritual level, to unite us with our children. And it's just really beautiful when you think that so many people and how awesome God is. How many people God used the worst sin in their lives to bring them to Himself, and
Yes.
He does. Oh, I've seen Him do it over and over and over and over again. That He takes this terrible, terrible sin, never okay, but still He uses it. He uses this terrible, terrible thing to bring people to Himself, and it's just so beautiful when you think about that.
It is. Our parish priest actually gave a homily this past weekend, and he quoted Saint Augustine, who said that every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. And just the beauty of that line, just remembering that no matter how much you've sinned, there is a future. And also that the saints didn't start out as saints. They had pasts and they had to work their way and work through their trials and their temptations to get to God. And that God's grace led them through that all. And he wants us all. And it is really beautiful when you see that playing out in ministry.
Yeah, it really is. It's just amazing. Like I'm amazed all the time, and the further along I go, and the further along I realize my own brokenness.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's almost incomprehensible that the ministry came out of like whatever seriously, but it didn't come out of me. It came out of them, and it's just yeah, it's just really beautiful how He uses people, and it's beautiful to be able to do the ministry and see the way He works in everybody's life. It really is. It's been a huge gift to me.
Yeah, I mean, we're just instruments in God's hand. So it's
Right,
him writing the story and we're just the ones he uses. So
right, so
um
true.
what exactly are your retreats? Are they more about the religious side of helping people find God's healing or about the psychological healing or is it both together? What
Yeah. So
what's
we
targeted?
implement all of it. Okay, so Entering Canaan begins with what we call the Day of Prayer and Healing, and it's a 1 day retreat. And really, our goal for that day is just to give people hope of healing, period, the end. So they come and they hear a witness of healing from someone. And then we have a video that we show on healing from abortion. We have a group where people are able to share what they went through. We offer the sacrament of reconciliation. We have a mass, and we have our book of names where they can, if they're ready, write their baby's name in it at the end of the day. And our hope is just to make them comfortable with us that day, and again, to give them hope of healing, because so many people come with no hope. They have no hope of healing. They think they're doomed forever. And so after that, we have what we call the gatherings, which are monthly groups. And these groups will address always, Entering Canaan is very sacramental. We always have exposition of the Blessed Sacrament. We have the sacraments available all the time. That's our greatest gift in our church, right? And the power of Jesus Christ. That's the thing ultimately. But the groups will be like a like we might talk about. So denial is a huge thing in healing, like working through the denial of what you did. So maybe one of the gatherings will be on denial, and we'll have the Bible verse from Peter, Peter's denial, and we'll have questions after it in relation to abortion, and they'll spend some time before the Blessed Sacrament, and then we have a group after that, and so they share with one another, and we share. So that's where a lot of the psychological aspect comes into it as well, in dealing with these different things that come up in healing. And then we have different weekends. We have the Hope and Healing Weekend, which really is the first weekend we do that really deals with specific things relating to healing, like what's the difference between shame and humility? Because some
Mm.
people think shame is humility and it's not, right? Allowing God to love you, learning to love yourself as a child of God. So they're all conferences, and each conference has a different woman giving a talk, and then whoever the priest spiritual director is will give a second talk. So there's like 5 conferences in each weekend, and they each deal with a specific issue. We have group or whatever. And then once a year, I write a New Mercy Retreat, which is a weekend retreat as well. And it's for more advanced people. So we have people that have been involved in the ministry for, 25 years, that come to that Mercy Retreat, give talks at the other retreats. So it really builds community in the different places. It's about probably 18 to 20 places across the United States now. And it, the mercy retreats that I do, like people will come from all of those locations or whatever. I do it once a year. And they're very beautiful because different people so each retreat also has like a progression. So maybe somebody that's pretty new in the ministry could give give the first talk, but the last talk would be somebody that is really, you know, progressed a lot in their healing or had a great deal of healing. And so they just really minister to one another. We have the groups, we have, whatever. So it's ongoing. Some people keep coming, some people leave for a while, then they come back. But our thing is healing is a journey. Like it would be great if it could be done in a weekend, but it's not realistic that you're going to recover from an abortion in a weekend. I mean, God could do anything he wants, but I haven't seen that. It takes time. And some people will feel great for a while, think they're done with their healing. And God does give you plateaus where you rest for a while, but he's always looking to go deeper into our wounds, to heal us more deeply, to give us more peace, to take away any residue that might be there. So chances are he's going to give you this great peace, and you're going to feel wonderful for a really long time, and then you're going to get zapped again, not because he doesn't love you, but because he does love you, and he wants to heal us to our core. And so we're always there. We try to just say we're always going to be there consistently, to accompany you on your healing journey. We're here whenever you want us. And it's just been really beautiful because, like I said, we have people that have been involved for decades that just help other people and, are still on their own journeys to some extent too. I began the ministry with the Sisters of Life, the women's ministry, and then I started doing men and siblings, with the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal. I work very closely with. That's who does those with me. And yeah, it's just something. Like I said, it's a progression, and you just see it. You just see it, and over the years, I know I've just been blessed to see so many people reach healing. It's just been really beautiful.
What first got you on the path to developing this ministry? Was there like anything specific, or did it happen organically in your journey of
Yeah.
healing?
Well, let's put it this way: I was pretty upset that there wasn't very much out there for post-abortion.
Yeah.
So once I finally got my healing, this is crazy. This is how it ended up that I started writing to Cardinal O'Connor and saying, "You got to have some stuff out there." And he actually wrote back to me. He would write back to me. And then as I moved along in my life, I started working for the Respect Life office. And
Mhm.
anyway, to make a long story short, he promised me when he started the Sisters of Life that this would be one of their ministries. And it just so happens that one of the original Sisters of Life was a friend of mine from my parish. And so Sisters of Life was formed. Um, it was really just me and Mother Agnes and Sister Lucy, who started the ministry. And we didn't really know what we were going to do. It just kind of came out of my own healing experience, step by
Mhm.
step by step. And that's pretty much what Mary has done. Is she's just revealed it very, very slowly over the years. And then what ended up happening is after we were doing it for a few years, the USCCB called and asked us for our manual, and we looked at each other and we said, "What manual?" We didn't have a manual or anything. So after that, we did the woman's manual, and we prayed about a name. Entering Canaan came to me in prayer too. And if you think about it, I remember when it came to me, I was in holy hour and I wasn't even thinking about it. And it was just like entering Canaan. And I'm like, what the heck does that have to do with post-abortion healing? Like that's what went through
Yeah.
my mind. And I went home and I started reading about the Israelites. And if you read about them, what did they do? They left their home and they started traveling. And some of them stopped because they couldn't take it because it was too hard. Others just kept going, right? They kept traveling. And what happened to them? They faced battles, right? They faced battles. And what did God keep saying to them? Don't worry, I'm with you. I'm going to be with you. I'm going to stay with you in this journey. And it just really is the journey of healing from an abortion. And it just blew me away when I read it and I realized that. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is. So then we had a name, and then the Lady Chestahova thing happened, and little by little, and I always say this is her ministry because I truly believe with all my heart that she has revealed it all. We just did a pilgrimage to Poland for people in the ministry. We went to visit Our Lady of Czestochowa in Jasnogora, Poland, which was phenomenal.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was really beautiful because it really is her ministry. There's no doubt in my mind at all, that this is totally hers.
It's such a feeling of peace when you know that it's God's work and not yours. Like you're like,
Right.
I'm doing my best and I'm just trying to bring to the table what I can, and it just really feels like He works
Pressure
for you.
off. Right? It's like, hey, this is up to you, God. You know what mess I am. So if you're picking me, it's your problem. It's so true.
Exactly.
But it is amazing when you think about, like, when I think about how broken, well, I'm still broken, but you know what I mean when I think
Yeah.
about where, I joke all the time, but this is so true. I used to be so shy that I couldn't even go order McDonald's, and that's the truth. And here he has me telling my worst sin in front of hundreds of people at a time, and like it's just such a work of the Holy Spirit. There's no question about it. If you took all that away from me, I'd be just as afraid and just as whatever as I was then. Like there's no
Mhm.
question about it.
Well, thank you for being willing to be vulnerable that way and share your story with people and help
Yeah.
facilitate healing for others.
Yeah, well, how many people are out there suffering, and you just want to give hope to people and let them know that they don't have to live their lives like that there's millions of us out there, and God wants their healing.
It's so important for Catholics these days to be able to respond with that love and that mercy because, like you said, there are millions of women walking around, and so many of them are stuck in defending, quote, like pro abortion policies because they don't want to face that, or it's their only way to justify it and their only way to, you know, not have to grapple with the weight of what's happened. And I think it's just so important to be able to extend like hands that will love them and help them guide them on that journey and show them that they're not alone and that they're not that Catholics aren't judgmental, that we want, like, we're all sinners and we want to help them be able to walk along that path and that we're all broken and that God's really the one working through us.
It's so true. I just wish that, like, I wish we conveyed that more within the
Mhm.
church, though, because sometimes, we'll talk about the babies, and we should talk about the babies. I'm not saying that
Mhm.
we shouldn't, but like I'm a firm believer is we never should talk about the babies without talking about the moms and healing, because you know they're out there. They're in everybody's pews. They're in every church. They're
Mhm.
all over the place, and we need to keep reaching out. Right? Jesus Christ came to call sinners, right,
Mhm.
to bring redemption.
And it's always that balance of we can't not talk about the truth. Like we do have to talk
Right.
about the truth. We do need to say what abortion is, but we need to speak
Right.
the truth with love, and we can't have one without the other.
Exactly. And that's exactly it, to speak the truth with love. Exactly.
We
Never okay to have an abortion. I don't care what the circumstances are. It's never okay. But despite the fact that it's never okay, God's love and mercy is still waiting there for you. Right?
Yeah. We actually had Kelly Lester on the show back in the fall, and she's from And Then There Were None. And she was saying that everyone who works in the abortion industry is like pro women, like that a lot of people are there for that reason. It's either that or financial. And she was saying that it's really important that pro lifers can show that we are pro women, that we do love the women, and that abortion isn't pro women. That's really the key to being able to change hearts and minds is it's not pitting mother against baby, it's helping mother and baby.
Right. Well, that's for sure. Yeah. Right. That we need to have those alternatives out there to let people know,
Hmm.
and expose the lies. Right. Like I keep praying that. I mean, personally, I'll go and pray in front of clinics, and I do a lot of talking and a lot of workshops and stuff like that because a lot of people, like, we don't think it, but so many people are still so ignorant of all of this. They really just don't know, and they really think that by supporting abortion, or I don't believe in it, but that whole thing, that they're doing a justice to women, and they need to learn, and that's because most people that are suffering, right, they keep it a secret. They
Yeah.
don't tell. I had somebody recently who had her abortion like 40 years ago, and I was the first person she ever talked to. So, and that's not the first time that's happened. So I think that's a big part of it, is that the people, I always say, who's sitting on your couch? How many women I know that are married and have other kids and had abortions in college or whatever, and their husbands don't even know that they had an
Mm.
abortion. So there's just such a wide range of people out there. How many people don't talk about it because they don't want their children to know? How many people, like, the devil's kind of got it like all over the place, like, as far as keeping people quiet about it, and so he's got a hold on it in so many different ways. And I think it's just so important for us to be out there speaking the truth and educating, so that people know that they're not alone, and know of the really real harm that abortion does to women, to men, to siblings,
Mhm.
to everybody. It's destructive.
Yeah, for sure. What
Yeah.
are some common, like, psychological or emotional effects of abortion on women that you've seen in your ministry?
Well, anxiety,
Mhm.
depression, right? Promiscuity, alcohol abuse, drug abuse. Like, there's just so many different ways it can manifest itself. A lot of people have been sexually abused, so that could be part of it too. So, nightmares, anniversary date trauma, birth date trauma, like all of those different things can, like I said, we talk about abortion connectors, people, places, or things in the present moment that are triggered because of the trauma of the abortion in your past.
Mhm.
And people have, like, a Mother's Day could be a
Mm.
huge trigger. Christmas Day, Mary, who was, Mary and said yes to God, and wasn't married in a day and age where she could have gotten stoned to death, but still said yes to God to bear Christ. She could be a huge trigger. That could be a huge trigger. Christmas in general, just with the toys and the children. So all of these things can bring about all this psychological suffering, but people might not even know it. I often talk about one time, um, when I had my two kids, my two living kids, and it was Mother's Day, and I remember having them in the carriage and walking around and crying all day, but I didn't even know why. I didn't even know why I was crying all day, and it wasn't until much later that um that whole thing came out, that I was mourning the loss of my child that I killed through abortion, and it just brought up all these feelings and triggers for me. And how many people do that? I remember going to church, and when they say all the mothers stand up, not wanting to stand up but feeling like I had to because I had living children, but thinking I didn't deserve to stand up when the
Mhm.
priest was going to give the blessing. So just all kinds of things like that. It can manifest itself in so many different ways without you most times even being aware that that's what it is. And that's why it's so important to learn those things, because then, like, for me, okay, I was abandoned, right? So for me, every time I had an argument or something with somebody, it was the end of a relationship.
Mhm.
So once I recognized that I was doing that, like, there was no such thing as, oh, we just disagree. It was just like, okay, this didn't work out. See, sorry later. But once I recognized that I was doing that, I was able to say, wait a minute, this isn't about what's happening right here and now. It's okay to disagree. I don't have to agree with everybody on everything. I could still be friends with them. I could still have a relationship with them. And just recognizing and being able to identify the ways that my abortion was triggering my life, my present life. And it still does sometimes. I still, to be completely honest with you, I could still have abandonment issues. There's no question about it. Something can happen and the trauma of that abortion will get triggered in me. The difference between then and now is I can sit there and I know what it is. And so I can get through it and past it, through prayer, my relationship with God, and recognize that it has nothing to do with what's going on in my life right now. It's definitely bringing up, the trauma of my abortion.
Yeah. No, that's so true that it's so important to recognize how trauma manifests itself so that you know when it's happening what it is, and that not to dwell in, oh, your victimhood or something like that. Like some people get frustrated with trauma and therapy and all of that because people use it to justify being a
Yeah.
victim, but more to be able to recognize where your wounds are so you can work on healing and not get like drowned by the emotion that you're feeling now.
Right. It's so important. It's so important. It really is because it can affect your whole life,
Yeah.
Yeah.
How can our listeners help people in their lives who have had abortions? What can they say to help them, and what should they definitely not say? What would be bad, like not helpful?
Okay, so I would think people often ask this. Well, I know this one had an abortion. It doesn't seem to be bothering her. What can I do? Like they
Mhm.
almost want it to bother her because they want them to get healing and whatever. And there really isn't anything that you could do there except for maybe, okay, so these are some suggestions that I've given people that have worked in the past, like maybe if they came to hear me speak someplace or a different speaker who spoke on this, like just nonchalantly say, oh, I went to such and such today and I heard this person speaking about abortion. It was really wonderful to hear how God healed and whatever. And you plant the seed, right?
Mhm.
Just planting the seed. I had somebody one time who took our pamphlets and put them in the mailbox of somebody that they knew. And that person found them in her mailbox, didn't do anything with them then, but I don't remember how much later it was. She ended up calling us,
Oh, wow.
and coming in for help. And it was a long time after, but she held on to those pamphlets. And just, things like get over it, it's in your past, you could have another baby. Those are all not good things to say. You know what I mean? Like it's really just, I think just offering hope and allowing them to express their feelings, to acknowledge how terrible it was without condemning them, just like you said, the truth with love, and just to accept where they are because it is a process. It really is a process. And you can't force somebody to look and you can't force somebody to move into it. It's something that we had a woman once who she had given a baby up for adoption. Then she got pregnant and she aborted the baby. Then she got married and she had a baby and she had postpartum depression. And anyway, she was suicidal and she was actually going to commit suicide and decided to clean her house because she didn't want to leave it for her kids, like to clean. And she went into a drawer in her kitchen and she had a bulletin announcement that we had in one of the things. She had cut it out and put it in her thing, and she came across the bulletin announcement that was in there for God knows how long, and thought, okay, well, maybe I should do this before I kill myself. Maybe I should give one more thing a try. And she ended up calling us up, coming into the ministry, becoming very active in the ministry, actually worked with me until she's passed away since then, but actually worked with me. It was just like, it's such a miracle of God's grace, that this happened, and she found healing, and it was just such a beautiful thing to see. So it's in God's time, not our time. And I always tell the women, don't look at where anybody else is. God knows what you need, and He's giving you your healing is in the present moment, here and now, with what you need. And I think that's really important too, because sometimes people are given the impression, oh, you could be healed in a weekend, you could be healed this, you can be healed that. And personally, I think that's a grave injustice because they could come to one of our retreats and feel great after, and then a week later, maybe something's going to start bothering them again. And then what's that going to do? That's going to feed in the whole emotion of, well, God could forgive everybody but me. You
Mhm.
know, no, that's not true. God knows what each one needs. And so he gives it to you. And somebody maybe is going to get healed in a year. Somebody maybe it's going to take 10 years because maybe they had a lot of different things going on in their life. It doesn't matter. Your healing is in doing God's will and trusting him each day, each moment at a time. And that's where your healing is going to come from. And that's what we try to tell them because it's true. You know, it's true that he works in his own time, not in our time. You know,
That's so true. That's so, yeah, his timing's perfect. It's hard to look at sometimes and understand what it is, but his
right.
timing's
I want
perfect.
it, I want it right now. I want to be healed right now. But that's not the way he works, and he knows better than we do.
Yeah. And I mean, it seems like it's just holding a person's hand as they walk along and God's
Right.
walking with them and just,
Right. And allowing them to talk about it because, like I said to you before, like sometimes, you have the abortion and then nobody wants to talk about it anymore. And a part of that not wanting to talk about it is because they don't know what to say. But
mhm,
maybe you don't need to say anything. Maybe you just need to listen.
mhm,
Maybe you just need to be there for support for them and just allow them to talk about it and to process it because other people don't want to allow them to do that. And I think that that's just so important to be able to have that.
and isn't that true for any grief? Like, you don't walk
Yeah.
up to someone who's grieving, having lost a parent or a sibling and say, "Get over it," like it's in the past or anything like
Right.
that. Like, it's
Right.
it's grieving.
Yeah, but you're not allowed to grieve. You're not allowed to have these feelings, which is terrible. But and then the other half of that is like now there's some places, and I think this is terrible too, personally. But like some places are starting to call abortion pregnancy loss, and I think that it is a pregnancy loss, but you need to take responsibility for your part in it. There needs to be repentance, and not allowing somebody to enter into that
Mhm,
is not helping them. Like it's not like it's almost like we're watering it down just like the other side is, only from the other side.
mhm,
And I think we need to be really careful about that because abortion is a mortal sin. It's a very serious sin, but have different levels of responsibility in it depending on their circumstances. And no matter what your level of responsibility is, God's mercy is there for everyone because healing isn't about us and what we did. Healing is about Jesus Christ and what he did in dying on the cross for us. And that's maybe the biggest takeaway I could say here is that it's not about us. It's about him and his love and his mercy and his dying on the cross for us and his desire for our wholeness and our healing. And that's what you got to stay focused on while learning all the other stuff.
that's beautiful. I was gonna ask if you had any last thoughts, but I feel like that's a really good
There it
summary.
is.
If there's anything else you wanna
What?
add, but
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty much it. Seriously, keep your eyes on Jesus Christ. Look at his love for you, and allow him to heal you, and allow him to take you step by step through the healing process because it is about him and what he did for us. We can never make up for our abortions, never. It's just impossible. But we don't have to because he has by dying on the cross, and I think that that's the biggest thing to remember always.
that's so true. I also loved the point you brought up earlier about how people who have had abortions might struggle with Mary because I've never thought of it that way, and that's just good to have in the back of my mind to be aware of that that is there because that was probably the most surprising takeaway that I had from this whole conversation is recognizing how important Mary is for people in that situation, but also how it might take a little bit longer for them to be able to get there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And also, like what was Mary made for? Mary was made to stand at the foot of the cross, right? She was given to us at the foot of the cross by Jesus. And to know that she's our advocate because
Mhm.
she does God's will and God's will is for us to get to heaven. But it does take a while to get there. I mean, I know I had a real big struggle with her in the beginning of my healing because I just felt like, oh, this woman is everything I'm not, you know what I mean? And how could I possibly? But again, it's about them and what they did, not about us and what we do. And they're there to help us because they desire our healing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. I've really enjoyed it. The time's flown by, and I'll put in the description the links to your website as well so people can go there if they're interested. So,
Okay. Thank you so much for having me.
oh, thank you for being on. I loved this conversation.
Good.
And and to all of our listeners, please like, follow, subscribe, check out the new ebooks we have coming out, And follow us on social media. We now have a Instagram account and Twitter account for the podcast. So definitely check us out there. I'll put the links in the description. And keep on living the culture of life. God bless.